degrees north latitude. So I said, well, that's great. I had construction equipment in the Army. I was operating bulldozers and pans. So they had to build a road before we could even build a pipeline. Then I found that the better paying jobs were working on the oil rigs up in the Arctic Ocean. And they couldn't build the rigs fast enough in 1973. The work was very difficult and dangerous, but it paid really well, especially $1973. And they were putting crews all over. From Alaska, we were in Southeast Asia, we were in the North Sea, we were in the Middle East. Well, it has its drawbacks as well. Even though the money is great, you have storms out in the North Sea like this one where they evacuated, the entire rig was falling apart. Other times there are accidents on the rigs. Every day someone is losing a finger or a hand or something. The rigs are tipping over. And then there's what's called a blowout. As you drill deeper into the core of the earth, gas is coming up. And if the gas is not contained, it can explode like this one on the New Horizon. 13 men died in that accident. I said, okay, well, that's about enough of that. What else can I do? Well, I love skiing. So I said, what about being a snow bum, being out in the ski areas here? I moved to Park City, Utah, and that proved to be perfect. Working in Deer Valley and Park City, Stein Eriksen had opened the new resorts there. And I was working alongside people who had PhDs who were waiting tables just so that they could ski in the wintertime. Well, that's well and good in the winter, but then I said, what am I going to do in the summertime? Well, 1980 is when the Hunt brothers trying to corner the silver market, and gold went through the roof. So we went from Park City down to Hanksville in the desert down in the Henry Mountains, and they're going to be a gold miner. Oh, this looks good on your resume. But it was exciting, it was fun, and it was productive. We had our little sluice box and we were panning for gold, and we got gold dust and gold nuggets. But you're still not building a career. I said, okay, I've got to do something a little bit more worthwhile. What about taking this road that's less traveled, visiting the places that I've seen and want to see around the world, and working as a tour guide? Well, that was what I decided I wanted to do. So I got trained as a tour guide in many of these places, and pretty soon we were doing programs like bicycling across the Netherlands. Well, that's pretty flat, as flat as a table, and there's not a more beautiful place in the springtime than the Netherlands during tulip season. So that was a lot of fun. Branched out from there, doing programs of more adventure travel. This is the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, looking down at 19,340 feet above sea level. We were taking tour groups up there. We were also doing hot air balloons across the Serengeti. Oh, what's not to like about that? It was fun, great fun. Soon we were paddling kayaks and canoes on tributaries of the Amazon, or trekking in the southern tip of South America in the Los Glaciares and the Torres del Paine National Park, some of the most dramatic scenery in the world. And then a couple of my favorite places when we were up in the tallest waterfall in the world. That's 3,212 foot high in Venezuela. It's called the beautiful Bridal Veil Fall. Over here is Machu Picchu, lost city of the Inca. 9 trips we made to Machu Picchu. We're trekking above the clouds here in the Himalayas, looking at some of the highest peaks in the world. There is Mount Everest, looking at the great civilization of the Khmer people in Cambodia, Angkor Wat. And another couple of my favorite places, Australia and New Zealand. Before the Middle East became a very difficult place to visit, we were doing camel trips across the Wadi Rum in the footsteps of Moses and Lawrence of Arabia. We had the visits to Petra, the rock city, and to the great fortress of Masada in Israel. Now, in the United States, I was doing bicycle trips, 450 miles from Buffalo, New York, all the way to the Hudson River there at Troy, on the Erie Canal, or whitewater rafting in the Grand Canyon. Another company I worked for did horsepacking trips. We went up in the Tetons, and then the great summers that I spent in Alaska. But the last 30 years have been in Alaska. Then when the cruise lines were calling, said, bring your programs on board for the places that we're visiting around the world. And you'll do that as a tour guide and as a speaker on board cruise ships. So we're going to be following a sea road now. And that's what I've done for the last 37 years until everything shut down last March. Well, the cruise ships are everywhere in the world, as you know. Many of you I've talked to have traveled. They're operating anywhere from the Arctic all the way to Antarctica, and just all the places in between that we visit. The Caribbean, you're in the British Isles, the Baltic Sea, the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, we're in the west coast of Africa. We're in Australia and New Zealand. There are cruise ships on the east and the west coast of South America going full circumnavigation of that continent. Will be sometimes 17 trips we made through the Panama Canal, one of my favorite places in the world to visit. We're also in the maritime provinces of Canada on Canada's east coast, and then the summers in Alaska there on our North American west coast. Of course, visiting Tahiti, South Pacific Islands, Bora Bora, Moorea is always a great adventure too. So people ask me, what about working then on a cruise ship? How do you do it? What do you do? What kind of jobs are available? Well, certainly there's a lot of pluses, and for me, there were 37 years of pluses with only a few minuses. What do you think about then when you're going to get a job on a cruise ship? You look at the type of positions that are available. You want to be wait staff, you want to be the hotel staff, all types of crew, or are you going to be a staff member? There's a big difference here. I was considered staff. I had guest status as a speaker. I mean, I was in a guest suite. I had full access to all the public rooms and the dining rooms. I didn't eat in the crew mess and didn't attend the crew drills. The crew members do that. Staff working as an independent contractor was the right spot for me because I would come on for a specific period of time. Might be 2 weeks, might be 4 weeks, it might be 3 months if it was a full world cruise, working as an independent contractor for different lengths of contracts. Now, these were much shorter than most of the crew. A crew on a ship might be anywhere from 4 months to 6 months. I've seen guys been on as long as 8 months at a time. Mine might be anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months is what my length of contracts were. Independent contractor was the way to go for me. And it was living the dream. I mean, going to the different places around the world that I had always dreamed of, wanted to see, wanted to go back to, on all the 7 continents, all the oceans of the world, the great cities, the great ports, and sea time itself. Now, I'd always been a fan of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. That was my bucket list. I wanted to go to the places where these 7 wonders were. I got to do that on a cruise ship. And I said, well, wait a minute. You got to name the 7 wonders of the world. How many of them around the Mediterranean? Only one was not. This is a great trivia question. Matter of fact, the man won $10,000 naming the 7 ancient wonders and which one is not on the Mediterranean. Now, when you win them big money, don't forget who gave this to you. Here's 2 of them that were in Greece: the statue of Zeus in Olympia in the Greece Peloponnesus, and the Colossus that spanned the harbor of Rhodes on the island of Rhodes just off the coast of Turkey. Both of these, of course, are gone. The statue of Zeus was gold and ivory, and it was one of the wonders of the world. It stood in the temple of Zeus there in Olympia. Colossus of Rhodes collapsed in an earthquake only about 40 years after it was completed. 2 of them were in Turkey, the temple of Artemis, which is close to the holy city of Ephesus, and the mausoleum of Mausolus in what is today Bodrum, in ancient times was Halicarnassus. Now, the one that was not on the Mediterranean, when the money here, is in today's Iraq, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. There are 2, the last 2 were Egypt, the lighthouse of Alexandria on the port city there at the Nile Delta, and the other one, the Great Pyramid of Giza on the Giza Plateau in Cairo. Now, that is the only one that is visible today. All the other 6 have long vanished into antiquity. Visiting them was interesting, though. Going into Alexandria is the port city for Cairo. Cairo is a 3-hour bus ride inland, but you go into the port of Alexandria, and the bottom photograph shows what it must have looked like in ancient times when that lighthouse was one of the ancient wonders of the world. We take the ride into the Pyramid of Cheops. There are 3 grand pyramids there on the Giza Plateau in Cairo. This is the largest, the oldest one. The ruler Cheops had it built as his funerary monument. For 3,000 years, this was the tallest structure man-made on the planet Earth. 13 acres at the base. 2 million blocks of limestone were floated down the Nile River to construct this pyramid. Now, next door was Israel and the great city of Jerusalem, another spot that I had wanted to see. This is the city, of course, that is inland. You go into the port of Ashdod or Haifa, where the ships will be calling, and then we're transferred into the city of Jerusalem. Now there in that walled city was the ancient city of Jerusalem, the city of King David it was called. Of course, Israel today has expanded. The city of Jerusalem expands far out beyond those old walls, but that's sites there in the city of Jerusalem, the holy sites there, are sacred to the three great monotheistic religions of the world. The wall at the bottom, that's the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, was all that's left of the Temple of Solomon. That's the holy spot for the people of the Jewish faith, destroyed by the Romans in 79 AD. The Golden Dome Mosque that you see, that's the Mosque of Omar. That's the holy site for the people of the Islamic faith. The Muslims go there. That's supposed to be the spot where the Prophet Muhammad ascended into heaven from a rock that's inside there. And then just outside the gates of Jerusalem is the site most sacred to the people of the Christian faith, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built on the spot where Christ was crucified. In those days, they didn't have the executions in the city center. It was outside the gates of the city. Mosaic law, you buried the dead with the dead, not among the living. So this church was built on the site of the crucifixion. Now there are 7 new wonders. Here, you might win some big money here. In a 7-year voting period, people from all over the world were asked to submit what they think should be included as the 7 new wonders of the world. Now think of the sites that you've seen and which you would vote for in that. Well, in 2007, the 7 winners were announced. One was in Italy, one was in Jordan, we have one in India, there is one in China, there is one in what is today the Yucatan of Mexico. There are 2 in South America, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. Now, what are these? Well, this is the one in Jordan. Now, our ships will go into Aqaba here on the Red Sea. This is the city made famous when Lawrence of Arabia made his backdoor attack on the Turks there in World War I, took Aqaba. You go inland to the city of Petra, which is south of the capital of Amman. And Petra is the rock city of Jordan. That was listed as one of the new 7 wonders of the world. We'll go there on camels so that you can get the full effect of seeing what's called the Al-Khazna. Al-Khazna is the treasury. That is the most important of the tombs and the palaces that were carved out of this red rock sandstone right in the desert by these people prior to the Romans. Another site, we'll go into the port city of Mumbai in India, and you travel inland to Agra. And there, of course, you're going to see the Taj Mahal. Shah Jahan wanted to create a mausoleum unlike anything the world had ever seen for his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. When she died, he went into grieving. He put her body in there, and it is today the crown of the palace, Taj Mahal. The beautiful thing about this, it changes colors during the day as the sun highlights this glorious marble, and it'll go from a white to a pink to different shades during the day. Now, if we're in China, you want to see sites, you go into the port of Shanghai, you can go into Tianjin, port city of Beijing. And there you're going to take a look at the Great Wall of China. This is supposedly the only man-made site on Earth that's visible from outer space. Astronauts have noted that they can see the Great Wall. Snakes for over 13,000 miles across China, built by the Qing dynasty to protect the people there from the Mongolian invaders coming out of the steppes of Asia. I mentioned 2 in South America. One of them is over here on the East Coast, the great city of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Now, Rio is one of the most beautiful cities in the world to sail into. You go into Guanabara Bay, you're looking at Sugarloaf there. And then on the right, you see Cristo Redentor, Christ the Redeemer. This is a statue 2,300 feet above the city of Rio, with Christ spreading his arms over the city at the bay. The other one on the West Coast is in Peru, and that is the great lost city of Machu Picchu, lost city of the Inca. How was it lost? When was it lost? Who found it? This is interesting because the Inca were considered among the most advanced of the pre-Columbian civilizations. Probably the Maya were more advanced, most historians feel, but the Inca had a road system through the Andes that connected their cities. Now here in Machu Picchu, they feel was probably a Camp David for the Inca emperor. When he died, the next emperor would own his own Camp David. So this was lost until 1911 when a Yale University professor named Hiram Bingham, you want some fascinating reading, get something on Hiram Bingham. His father was a missionary. He was born in Alaska, but he ran away. He couldn't stand being on an island. He couldn't stand missionary work. So he became an archaeologist and an explorer. And in 1911, he was hacking his way through the highlands of Peru, looking for what he thought was the last capital of the Inca Empire. It turned out it was the city of Machu Picchu that had been abandoned just before the Spanish conquest. So it sat for 400 years, and it is now one of the most visited sites in the world for people who want to get up about 7,000 feet in the Andes to look at this lost city of Machu Picchu. Incredible journey. Mention one is in Central America, and that is in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. This is the Mayan Empire, covered the state of Chiapas, Yucatan, Quintana Roo, and what is now Mexico, along with Belize and Guatemala. Now, the empire here, the Maya, really vanished before the arrival of the Spaniards. They weren't really conquered. They just vanished into the mists of time. What happened? Well, archaeologists and anthropologists are still studying, but they feel that the Maya were so advanced, National Geographic called them the Greeks of the New World. The amazing temples and palaces that they built, carved out of the rainforest, one of the most difficult places in the world to build a civilization. These people were studying the heavens and knew a 365-day calendar year when people in Europe were still huddling in caves. Now, their great contribution to the seven is the Grand Pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. This is an inland city as well on the plains of the Yucatan. You can't go up and down the pyramid anymore. You used to, but people were falling so often, so many injuries that now they've closed it off, but you can look at it and see what was an incredible structure built by the Maya. Now, where the pyramids of Egypt were just limestone blocks piled on top of each other, these were intricately placed with a stair step for the priests who went to the top of these temples for their sacrifices. And there are inscriptions in the Mayan hieroglyphic language, which was more evolved even than the Egyptian hieroglyph. There's over 400 glyphs in the Mayan language, one of the only people of pre-Columbia times who left a written language for us to study. The seventh one is one that I'm not sure I agree with. You go to Italy, you go to the city of Rome. Well, Rome is not a port city. It is an inland city on the Tiber River. So we go into the port of Civitavecchia, and as you see in this photograph, about 7 ships were docked there that day. Very, very popular to visit their contribution. And that is, of course, the Colosseum. Built by an emperor and a couple of his sons over about a 20-year period, and became the largest amphitheater in the ancient world. It was considered sacred and named so by one of the popes in the 15th century because of so many of the Christians who were martyred there. In addition, many of the gladiators competed there for about 300 years during the glory days of Rome. Made this then the 7th of the natural wonders. And what about living on a cruise ship? Okay, you're visiting all these places, but what's life like? Well, there's of course the fabulous dining and being able to relax around pools, casino, nightlife, parties with the captain, libraries that rival some of the libraries in some of the cities that I've been in. And of course, just taking it easy, looking over your veranda, getting ready to what you're going to do at night, watch some of the lavish shows. Let's look at some of this. Food. Okay, food is a featured activity on cruise ships. Now, what you're seeing here, you're not going to ever see again, because with the pandemic, the new guidelines that cruise ships will have to follow, they've taken away many of these grand gala buffets that people wandered and grazed along and just loaded up their plate after plate. They will have those, but you will be served by a staff member rather than just feeling through all the different things to take your pick. They'll still be there, all of the incredible chocolates and desserts and fruits and the beautiful carved fruit. Look at these watermelons. These guys are artists as well as master chefs. Then there is something that's always fascinated me, the ice carvings. They'll have a demonstration poolside of where one of the chefs will take a giant clump of ice, and in a matter of minutes there, he has created some incredible artwork. Whatever it is usually put on display there at some of these grand gala buffets. If you don't feel like going to a dining room, of course, people enjoy their verandas. Have your breakfast on the veranda. In the afternoon, you might call and have them deliver tea or a bottle of champagne while you watch a sunset. If you don't feel like dressing for dinner, well, there's dinner in your cabin. You bring it right there. You can enjoy the view that night. Now, the food is legendary. And they have a series of chefs work nonstop around the clock, preparing thousands of meals for guests as well as for the crew that have to be fed. And of course, each of the meals is going to be complemented with just the perfect wine. You can get carried away with feeding, certainly, especially when you're being entertained by the people who are members of the highest caliber of the culinary societies. The Confrérie de la Chaîne de Rôtisseurs is the Rolls Royce of chefs. Began in the 13th century, and every year they induct a number of new members into the Confrérie de la Chaîne de Rôtisseurs. This is the Super Bowl of the culinary arts. Now with that, you'll see some of the cruise ships like this one, Seabourn, will have celebrated chefs. Thomas Keller, you've probably heard of, will have his own dining room in one of the Seabourn ships. Now there is a little bit different. Instead of going to a dining room, it's a much smaller area. You make reservations there and you pay sometimes up to $100 to dine at with Thomas Keller's grill. Now, what I've always enjoyed also is meeting this man. Lawrence D'Almeida is a friend of mine. He was born in Europe, educated in the United States, had a degree from Harvard and from Yale, and became the wine ambassador for Silver Sea. He had his own winery in Napa Valley in California, where he learned the production, marketing, distribution end of it. And now he traveled, what a job this is, traveled the world and selects all the great reds and whites that are on the ships of Silver Sea, one of the luxury lines. He'll come on board to do a series of wine seminars, talking about the different reds and whites from different places around the world, wherever we happen to be visiting at the time. Even one in Tahiti. Can you imagine wine grown in coral, that they do have wine there? All the wine, all the food, all of this featured activities, you can get carried away, as this man obviously has. He said, I'll be coming on as a guest, they'll be unloading me as cargo. Well, you don't have to do that because cruise lines all now have elaborate fitness centers. You can go on to different machines, you'll have free weights, you'll have machine resistance training. You have a number of options that you can take all during the day and night, even when they have professional instructors come on board for different types of classes. So you don't get carried away with the food. But it's the activity that people enjoy, even on sea days, depending on the cruise that you choose. Do you want one with like this one with 3,000 or 4,000 people, a lot of families, a lot of children, or do you like something a little more quiet, older group? The smaller ships will cater to a different clientele. All of them feature these activities there, even on sea days where you can even watch a movie, not even go to your cabin. Have these giant screens outdoors. It's never Neverland. It's whatever you want really on a cruise ship, including this, what is going on here. Royal Caribbean has a very celebrated climbing wall. You'll have one of the crew or staff belay you as you practice and you compete in climbing competitions here. Norwegian has gone one step further. Go-karts on a cruise ship. Can you imagine that? But they do. They have a go-kart track and you can cruise up here in Alaska, look at the beautiful scenery as you spin around on a go-kart track. It is never Neverland. It's just whatever you want, they have them available on cruise ships, even if you want nothing. There's a friend of mine who's just getting a little siesta out on a ship covered up here, and we're in the Alaska waters, so he's got a bit of a blanket over. Now, this has led to an interesting situation down in Antarctica. I came out one day when we were in Antarctica and I saw this guy. I said, wait a minute, I got to go check on him. He looked like he had died of hypothermia. Snow, ice covered him. I said, you okay? He said, yeah, I just feel like on a cruise ship, I need to be out on deck. I said, well, it's snowing, it's freezing. He said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm not so sure I would trust that. Then at night, there are the grand entertainment venues. All the cruise ships will have large or smaller type areas where you can be entertained at night with lavish Broadway shows, great entertainment, or some different types of boutique ships that'll have these individual acts. If you like to gamble, well, all the ships will have a casino that opens after they get out of the territorial waters of wherever the cruise embarkation might be. You get out into international waters and the casinos are operating. So what about if I get sick or have an accident? Well, there's a full-time staff, 24-hour available of doctors and nurses that are on these ships. They will be very busy when the cruise lines crank up again, ensuring the space distancing and all of the vaccinations that are going to be required for people getting on cruise ships after the pandemic is over. Now, this is something that's rather new to cruise ships. Service dogs. I saw a lot of these. Of course, people might be vision impaired or might have some mobility problems, but then I saw some who had absolutely no problems at all and bring these cute, cuddly little pets with them with the little jacket that says they are a licensed service dog. I said, what's going on here? And the man on the cruise ship said, all they have to put is a doctor to sign that they need emotional stability, and the pet has to be allowed on board. They'll walk them. You can have one of the staff walk them if you don't want to walk your dog. And they have the little areas there, facilities for the pets. Now, normally these are on shorter cruises. They wouldn't be on the long month or 2-month cruises to bring your dog with you. Another perk for me, and this is one of the real highlights, is being able to go into the navigational bridge to meet with the captain and to provide commentary in different parts of the world that we're visiting. Now, this is the captain's domain up here. The captain, of course, on the hierarchy of a cruise ship, there's the captain, then there's God, then there's the rest of us on down the line. The captain is the man here. And in some cases, it is a woman. Now, this woman that you see here is the very first woman to be licensed as a master mariner. That means she can take any ship of any size into any oceans of the world. There are others now who have come on. She is the very first one. So the captain in command of his vessel will usually have, as we enter the different places that we're going to be visiting, a pilot boat that will bring a local pilot on board. The pilot is an expert in the local waters, and he will advise the captain, doesn't take control of the ship except in one place that I will show you. He advises the captain as to our entrance into the harbor or through the canal or whatever we're doing. Now, we're going into, of course, commentary that I'm providing as we go into Venice, here, the Grand Canal of Venice, or we're sailing into Guanabara Bay in Rio de Janeiro. This is Cape Town, South Africa, one of the most beautiful cities in the world to sail into or out of. In the back, you see Table Mountain, flat as a tabletop. The clouds on top are called tablecloth. It's usually a fog sitting right there. Now, we look at another of my favorite cities and one of the most beautiful to sail into. You might recognize the Opera House here. This is Sydney Harbor, Sydney, Australia, there in New South Wales. We're looking at the Coat Hanger Bridge, the Sydney Harbor Bridge. Another of the great cities where we provide commentary is when we're transitioning from the Aegean through the Sea of Marmara into the Black Sea and the city of Istanbul. 1931, Constantinople became Istanbul. Now there we're looking at the Bosphorus. We sail under the Bosphorus Bridge that just 2 years ago got a new name. On July the 15th, they attempted a coup to overthrow the government of Turkey. It was put down, and the 15 people who died on the 15th of July, the 15th July Martyrs Bridge. Now, on the left side, you're seeing Europe. On the right side, you're seeing Asia. This is another program, matter of fact, part of a program that I think you'd be interested, I'd love to present. It's on bridges around the world. Some of the most famous iconic bridges, which ones connect countries, which ones connect continents. This is one that connects a continent, Europe and Asia. Also doing commentaries, we sail up the Thames as far as Tower Bridge. Can't go any farther than Tower Bridge. We'll dock right there. Bridge is open for smaller ships to come in and out. And always enjoy going under the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. This is the bridge, lower New York Harbor, that connects Long Island here with Staten Island. Brooklyn on the left, Staten Island on the right. And the iconic Golden Gate in San Francisco and Marin County. There's also commentary as we sail around Alaska, going up the Inside Passage, one of the most scenic cruise itineraries in the world. We'll go all the way up to the face of some of the glaciers, like this is Hubbard Glacier, the largest tidewater glacier on Earth. We'll sail right in front of that and provide commentary talking about the ice that we're looking at. And then my favorite is the 41-mile journey through what McCullough called the path between the seas, the Panama Canal. French began construction in 1880. They gave up about 8 years later. The Americans took it over in 1902. And in 1914, they opened the Panama Canal. This is the bridge when you enter from the Pacific side that spans Central America, North America on the left, South America on the right, coming through Panama. Pan American Highway goes over this bridge. We go under it. And there, the only place in the world where the captain turns over command of his ship to the local pilot. And the reason is the local pilot works for the insurance company that's responsible for any damages that might occur as the ship transits the canal. We talk about the construction of the canal. Here's the great Gaillard Cut, where most of the thousands of deaths took place. They had to cut through 350 feet of the Continental Divide. French were never able to do that. The Americans did. But we transit from the Caribbean to the Pacific or vice versa, going through the old canal locks, which work flawlessly and continue to work today. This is called Panamax class ship, can go through the old locks. Now the new one is quite different. The post-Panamax vessels are much larger. Where a ship like this one, these are called TEUs, the Trans Equivalent Unit. It's a 20-foot unit there. Those are the trailers, Transportation Equipment Unit. In May of 2019, the largest ship ever to transit the canal came through. This was just last year. Before, a ship large enough that could carry about 5,000 of these containers was able to transit the old canal. With the new canal, and you see this guy is a post-Panamax class vessel, Neo-Panamax, the Triton, was squeezing through, almost touching both sides. This was the largest one, and it carried over 15,000 of these transportation equivalent units, 15,000 containers. You can imagine what they pay. Now, this was the largest cruise ship to transit. In April of 2017, one of the Disney ships, the Wonder, came through. Now, Mickey was on hand to present a check for over $331,000 as that ship made the transit. You think these enormous amounts of money that funnel into Panama for ships transiting the canal, and there may be anywhere from 13,000 to 14,000 transit every year with the new canal open. Now, what is interesting is that as much as that seems, think what it costs to go all the way around the tip of South America. Okay, those are the largest tolls ever paid. Begs the question, what's the lowest toll ever paid? Good question. Toll was paid by this man. You might recognize Richard Halliburton. In the 1920s and 30s, this man was famous as an adventurer. He paid 36 cents when he swam for 10 days through the Panama Canal. You've been through the canal, you know you don't want to swim in there. There's all type of debris floating in there, but it took him 10 days and he paid a total of 36 cents, which was his weight for transiting the canal. A little useless trivia there. Another place where we provide commentary is going through another canal. This is built just before World War I came around with the Kiel Canal, where the Panama Canal is 41 miles. The Kiel Canal is a 61-mile sea level ditch that connects Brunsbüttel here on the North Sea with Kiel in the Baltic Sea. 61-mile journey as opposed to 41 miles that you have at the Panama Canal, and much smaller ships. These are some of the smallest ships, but they have 3 times as many ships transiting here as you have at the Panama Canal. This is the oldest of the canals. 1869, the Frenchman who began construction of the Panama Canal in 1880 and failed was a man who would succeed in completing the Suez Canal. This connects Port Said of the Mediterranean up here, a port that was built just as the northern terminus of this canal, with the city of Suez down here on the Gulf of Suez, the Red Sea. It's 121 miles, 3 times the length of the Panama Canal, but very narrow, and it's a sea level ditch. Because it's narrow, they have northbound and southbound convoys that have to take a break right here at Ismailia or at the Great Bitter Lake, let the other guys pass. Now, it is, again, a canal without any locks, very important to traffic there in connecting the Mediterranean with the Red Sea. So we have a lot of cargo vessels, passenger vessels, and of course, military naval vessels that are coming through in this very important waterway. $250,000 average transit fee. But think what it costs to go around the coast of Africa. Another perk for me was being on board when there were celebrities on board. Now, you probably recognize this photograph. That's the Cleaver family, Leave It to Beaver, back in the late 50s, early 60s. Ward June, Wally, and Beaver Cleaver. Now, the lady there is Barbara Billingsley. I had a chance to meet her, and as a ballroom dancer, she wanted me to dance with her on a cruise to Alaska. Working in Antarctica, I was loading people on the Zodiacs when we do our visits, and I had a chance to meet former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Now, a year later, my wife and I met him again in Italy. We were in St. Terre and had a picture taken with him and his wife. Ageless beauty, 86 years old. There she is, Sophia Loren, 86 years old. She has been the godmother for over 20 ships that have been launched that have a godmother. Also had a chance to meet this lady who became a good friend of mine. The granddaughter of President Dwight Eisenhower is Mary Jean Eisenhower, David's daughter. She was the chairman and the executive officer of People to People International. Here we are on a Nile riverboat. We got a chance to meet the King of Jordan through her and the First Lady of Egypt before she and her husband went to jail. The First Lady of Egypt and her husband were in jail. Everybody recognize this man? Of course, that's Gomer Pyle, Jim Nabors. Jim Nabors didn't like to fly, so I met him on a ship, Los Angeles, going to Hawaii. He had a home in Maui. And he said, what I've done is to contract with him. I'll do a series of 4 shows. His voice, if you've heard him sing, is nothing like the Shazam Andy that he was on Gomer Pyle there with Andy of Mayberry. And then there was this man, legendary NFL coach Don Shula. He was a speaker on board, and where I'll have a series of programs and have all of these different images and narration, they gave him a sofa to sit on, and people just asked Don Shula questions. Quite an interesting guy. Another perk was in these expedition programs that I was fortunate to do. Might be paddling canoes in Antarctica or taking these journeys there in the boats around Greenland. What's some of the places there that you would not normally visit other than on a cruise ship? Unless even flying to these places, you're not going to get into some of these shots. Wake up and there is you're in a Zodiac and you have a humpback whale breaching just right in front of you. Or you might be paddling a kayak into some of the incredible ice formations there in Greenland. And then we were out with a group and had a pod of orcas, these killer whales, just surfaced right around us. A lot of fun that was. And then it's always fun and people interested in booking cruises that will cross the equator, crossing the line ceremony. Whether you're on a naval vessel or a cruise ship or cargo vessel, they have a big ceremony. There I am with the captain, I'm the King Neptune. And we are going through the ceremony where people who want to be initiated will go through a very elaborate ritual. You're gonna not just you're gonna pay a price here to cross the line. You're gonna get covered and have a fun show during this ceremony. You're no longer a polywog. You get your certificate. The people who have never crossed the equator are polywogs. After you cross, you are a shellback. So it's been a lot of fun doing those programs. And then, okay, all of those are perks. What about negatives? What's there to think about? Is there a downside to working on a cruise ship? Well, for me, there weren't, but there were things I had to think about. One, of course, as an independent contractor, you're not getting paid a lot of money, and you're only getting paid when you're working. The crew on a ship, of course, are employees of the cruise line. You are not, so you're getting paid only for your contracts on board. And then you think about, well, if I have a regular job, I'm going to get a paid vacation. Nope, not as an independent contractor. And get holidays up. Nope, not as an independent contractor. You might do a holiday cruise. You provide your own health care. You'll provide your own retirement programs. None of this is provided for an independent contractor on the ships. And then there is the big one that people, what about weather? What about when ships are out on the ocean? Well, things happen at home. We have storms here. You can imagine how it is on the ocean. It's not always the beautiful sun-drenched sunsets and calm waters. You could feel like you could almost ski behind a vessel. Some of these are such that you see King Neptune at his absolute worst. There is nothing worse than a storm at sea, because you figure, well, where are you going to go? There's nowhere to go. There is nowhere to hide. You're going to ride out the storm. And there, as you'll see, ships have been lost in different types of encounters like this. Well, here is an example from the navigational bridge. I was up there and talking to the captain. He said, we're going to rig for heavy weather. Look what's coming. And then at night, you might see the sky lit up by an unforgettable thing like this. This is an electrical storm at sea, looking at it from a distance. You can imagine, we know what that is, but the ancient people had no idea what was going on. You see the power of the gods. Now, they've identified some of the most dangerous waters to sail in the world. Up here in the North Sea is always listed, the Labrador Sea. Over here, we're going to show you one spot on the west coast of the United States. Boy, you wouldn't think of that. Right here, the Bay of Biscay in France, the southern tip of South America, Cape Horn, and the crossing over to Antarctica. Some of the most dangerous waters, even around the Cape of what's called Good Hope. See how bad that can be. And then crossing over from Australia to New Zealand. Here's the Labrador Sea. Between Greenland and the coast of Labrador here is some of the worst water in the world. How bad? Well, take a look at this video. This is a day we had about a 50-knot wind. We've got about a 25-foot sea. Now, most people are in bed at this time. There's no need, you don't want to be outside. The rain is coming down in sheets. So they'll close off the outside decks, ask you to stay inside. The people who aren't sick will just be sitting looking out the window, try to focus on the horizon to keep from getting sick. One lady I was doing this show a while back, she said, would you please go ahead and advance that slide? I'm getting nauseous just looking at that ocean. And it can be a nightmare. The Bay of Biscay is kind of interesting. Right there, France and Spain. Okay, that's almost landlocked by three sides, but it has some of the absolute worst weather you can imagine. Here is a ship that was in a sea, and they're not even a mile from shore. And they were about to radio a distress call when they were in these swells that were about to inundate the whole bow of the ship. This is a Viking vessel, Viking Cruise Line. They're going to launch a new ship this year. Norwegian Sea, they lost power. And that's the worst thing that can happen to a ship at sea when you lose power. You have to have somebody out there to help you. You see at the stern of the vessel, the captain has dropped an anchor to try to give them some stability. They were doing 15 and 20-degree rolls, even had helicopters who the pilots were brave enough to fly out in this weather, evacuated 146 of the 350 people who were on board before they finally got power restored. Pretty bad time there. Now, the southern tip of Africa we call the Cape of Good Hope. 1488, the first European, a Portuguese navigator, made his way around it, became the first European to find the limit of the coast of Africa. Cape of Good Hope there, it's at the southern tip, is actually not the tip of the continent. That's a little further south. There's Cape Town and the Cape of Good Hope. The actual tip is just a little further south than that. But that is where they have everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Here you have three oceans coming together. You have a very warm water from the Agulhas Current in the Indian Ocean. You have cold water coming up from the great Antarctic Sea, the Southern Ocean, and you have lukewarm water coming in from the Atlantic Ocean. So all of these three different oceans with their swells, with their temperature difference, create some of the most miserable conditions you can imagine. You don't want to be on these cargo ships here. It's called green water over the bow. The southernmost tip of South America is the same way. There you have the Cape Horn. Cape Horn is a series of islands, and Cabo de Hornos is one of those. Right there, 55 degrees, 59 minutes south latitude, almost 50 degrees south. There's nothing to the west, there's nothing to the east, no land mass. It's even below the southern tip of the South Island of New Zealand. The only thing further south is the land mass, which is Antarctica. So cruise ships will sail from Ushuaia down to Cape Horn, which is right there. Cape Horn is the end of the world. It's about an 800-mile journey from Cape Horn across what's called the Drake Passage, named after Sir Francis Drake, to the peninsula there at Antarctica. And it has been sometimes the Drake Lake, and as it is here, the Drake Shake, we call it. Look at those birds. Those are albatross who have no more problem in a 40 or 50 knot wind when it's about 38 or 40 degrees than they would sitting in my room right now in comfort. Albatross. Now, one ship attempting the Drake Passage crossing lost power. They had to be evacuated until they could restore power again. This is expedition ships. You can't imagine what it must have been like for people in the sailing days. Captain Bligh tried for 31 days to go around Cape Horn, couldn't make it. And here in the 1920s, from these photographs, sailors are still scrambling up the rigging, hanging with one hand for the rat line and the other hand to reef sail or furl sail. And these were blue water sailors. Still remnants of ships that didn't make it around Cape Horn. One that was lost here in Antarctica was the MS Explorer. And this is not 100, this is only 14 years ago now. MS Explorer was down there, a double hull vessel built for cruising in the ice, but they scraped a bit of ice that compromised the vessel. Now, this is an interesting cruise. You go down here, and sometimes we're soaking in Antarctica water. It's got to be freezing. Nope, it's warm as toast. This is an undersea volcano. It has a bit of water bubbling up, and we'll take a group ashore so you can say you swam in Antarctica waters. But what they did was to scrape some ice in a compromised section of the hull, and pretty soon the captain realized that he had lost the ship, ordered a Mayday evacuation. Luckily, there were 2 vessels in the area. About 4 hours later, they picked up the people who had been in lifeboats, and that's a dangerous situation. You're in temperature of the mid-30s with a wind. Hypothermia is very easy. They lost the ship. They lost the Explorer. It is gone. We see the last one we want to look at is over here in the Pacific Northwest. It's called the Graveyard of the Pacific. Oh, wow, this is from Vancouver Island south all the way to Oregon. And right there, where the Columbia River flows into the Pacific Ocean, is one of the most dangerous waters in the world. The Columbia River begins over here in Alberta in Canada, flows northwestward into British Columbia, and then south all the way through Washington, and it empties right there at Astoria, or just below Astoria, Oregon. 1,200-mile journey. And here, everything bad that can happen is happening. This is an area where the Columbia River, pretty good size at this time, 265,000 cubic feet per second. How much is that? Think of a soccer ball on cubic foot, 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. Think of 265,000 soccer balls going in front of your vision in space of 1 second. But that's how much water is emptying into the Pacific Ocean, squeezed as it is through the north and the south jetty here. Narrow 3-mile wide mouth. Astoria, Oregon is the town just from there. Now, bad things are happening here. You've got the huge amount of water from the Columbia River. You've got a current of about 4 to 5, even 7 knots coming out, plunging into the Atlantic Ocean. Right there, it's only under the Pacific Ocean, where it's only about a 55-foot depth. Many of the ships will draw 20 to 25 feet, so you don't have a lot of water underneath the ship. And you have an ocean swell from the Pacific and a coastal current coming from the south, all colliding in this one spot. And that creates a nightmare. Many ships have been lost here. What they've done is to designate a Columbia River bar that's 3 miles at its widest, the north and the south jetty, but you have the entrance is only about a half-mile wide. And there you're going to be squeezed even further into the tightest point that the cruise or the cargo ship has to navigate 600 feet. He's got to squeeze into. Now, for that, they have a Columbia River bar pilot. And these are the guys that come out in whatever kind of weather to bring these ships into or out of the bar. Captain will say, boy, she's blowing a stink today. And that's when this cargo ship down here, the hatch covers are about to get ripped off. The bar pilots are an incredible group of people. Mid-19th century is when they came about. Experts in these waters that will come out in the pilot boat and then have to make the very dangerous transfer from the pilot boat to the vessel. They wear what's called a float coat. This is something that just as soon as, if you're unlucky enough to hit the water, it will inflate. Now, even with the float coats and the other precautions, they've lost about 24 of these guys over the last 20 years. Sometimes you're going in at night, you're getting up into the bridge and bringing the vessel in. One woman among the 17 people who are licensed bar pilots. And this woman is incredible. Very first to graduate from a maritime academy, licensed as a master mariner, became a regular member of the Mariners Association, and the only one during the Persian Gulf War to be awarded a meritorious public service award. She is quite the lady. Written a book there, The Captain's a Woman. Deborah Dempsey is her name. Sometimes it gets so bad that the pilot just cannot get on board. What do? They have to close the bar. And that's a nightmare because the Astoria and Portland areas are huge for shipments of grain coming out of the United States and for cargo ships unloading all types of things. Cars, one of the largest ships here, the NYK, unloading cars from Japan, and the different containers. The trains can back up all the way to the Midwest in a matter of just a couple of days if they have to close that bar. But sometimes like this, they just cannot get on board. And sometimes they've got on board and have to be evacuated by helicopter. Can't get off the ship when it's time to leave. World's most dangerous job. There are accidents. You probably remember the Costa Concordia. Captain left a man not qualified to be at the bridge. They ran into so over here. And by the time it was over, 32 people had died as a result of that accident. And what about this? Pirates? Pirates today are one of the biggest considerations for maritime commerce, not just for cargo ships, but as you will see as we close here, for passenger ships as well. What's going on here? Well, since earliest people ever went to sea, there have been other people who wanted to take what they have. Pirates in Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean. Today, it's an industry. And up until about 2014, it was bringing in anywhere from 15 to as much as $21 billion a year for pirates in these oceans who will hijack a ship and hold the ship, its crew, and its cargo for ransom. One of the dangerous places, of course, is the Horn of Africa right here, Southeast Asia right next to it, the west coast of Africa off Nigeria, the three most dangerous places in the world. They're after anything. These are bulk haulers, there are cargo ships, tankers, even private vessels. You don't want to go in these waters without some kind of an escort. Whatever's on the ship can easily be converted into cash, and the ships are always carrying money as well to pay for different fees in ports and for tolls that they're paying. The Horn of Africa, about an 800-mile lawless strip off of Somalia, just north of Kenya there. The government's upside down. So pirates are operating with impunity here. This is a mothership. This is where the pirate ship, the small little panga boats and the fast ones will operate from a mothership going out into these oceans. These guys are better equipped than I was in the military. He's got full auto weapons here, GPS, satellite phones. They're communicating. The little panga boats and the Zodiacs will have the guy on the left here is loading a rocket propelled grenade, RPG. These were just coming into vogue in the 60s as I was in the military. In Vietnam, they were used by the NBA and the VC very efficiently. So these guys are coming out. They will spray the deck of a ship up at the bridge with their automatic weapons, with an RPG, and the ship usually will stop. He has no choice. They're not armed. Most of the ships are not armed until recently, as you'll see. They had what the insurance companies call risk mitigation. You might put some razor wire around the deck of the ship. You might have these high pressure hoses. You might have slippery foam. Those are great, but you don't want the guys to get that close to you. You want to keep them away. So you have satellite tracking now with the number of closed circuit television cameras and the communication system, which immediately broadcasting. They thought about what about additional training for the crew? That's not the answer. This poor kid here is about to shoot an AK-47. He's never done that. The barrel is going to ride up and hit him in the nose as soon as he pulls the trigger. This guy's practicing with a shotgun. That's great for shooting birds, but it's not for a man 300 or 400 yards away who has an automatic weapon. The answer has been this, the LRAD. Ships today have the long-range acoustical device. What it does is the man will put this device out here and turn it on, and it emits a high decibel, ear-piercing, shrieking sound that you cannot be around. It will keep you away. The real answer is private military contractors. Most of the cargo ships that operate in the Gulf of Aden, our cruise ships, and we're there, will have these PMCs on board. These are former military who have the latest and the greatest in all of the equipment, and they're trained in it. Now, these guys are quick to surrender. They were seen at night. Why? These guys have night vision goggles, night optical devices that he's had, lets you see them, they can't see you. So they're surrendering very quickly with these incidents dropping dramatically. When you have these private military contractors, the LRADs, the one ship that was attacked, a cruise ship, was one of the line that I worked for. This is Seabourn Spirit, very small ship. November the 5th, 5 o'clock in the morning, 100 miles off the coast of Somalia, they reported being under pirate attack. The pirate ship came out, the panga boats, the man was loading the RPG, the little boot gun he's got with his automatic weapons. The captain was able to maneuver and keep them from getting close to the ship, but they did take a lot of fire. Automatic weapons, you still see what they shot up the vessel in different places. And you'll see where the RPGs came right through the cap. What happens here, all the guests are asked to go into the dining room and to wait until the danger is over. But can you imagine RPG going right through your cabin? Luckily, it wasn't armed correctly and embedded in the side of the vessel. It had a United States naval ship that would come along later with the SEAL team to defuse that RPG. The head security officer and his assistant were both decorated by Queen Elizabeth II herself. They both were British subjects. So there are incredible perks, all of the wonderful sights that you see. The left one is the stacks off the coast of Australia. On the right is the great waterfall, the Zambezi River there. We're looking at the beautiful scenery in the southern tip of South America, up in Greenland, the Arctic, Japan. The expedition ships will take you to all the great places that you want to visit in the world. The perks, well, do they outweigh the downside, being away from home for a certain period of time? Well, where can you go out in the morning for a jog and see a whale breaching? Can't do that where I live. You can do it on a cruise ship. Looking at one of the most spectacular sunsets where you're out paddling a kayak here, looking at the whales. So there are perks, there are pluses, there are minuses. For me, it was 37 years of absolute perks. It was living the dream, and it has been, it's a great ride for me. It may be over. I don't know if I'll be asked to come back, when to come back, and how the cruise ships are going to realign, but interesting to look at it. So there, we have summed up in 50 minutes what it's like to work on a cruise ship, the places that you're going, the type of life that you're living. And Phil, if you want to unmute, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that anyone might have.
All right. Thank you, Niki. You have, in your 50 minutes, squeezed in an awful lot, I have to say. And I can start it off by asking a couple of questions. My first question is that I haven't actually seen you in person in a little while. I mean, you have come to New Horizons and spoken, and I haven't seen your image on your website or whatever recently, but I'm just sort of curious, given the kind of food that they serve on all these cruise ships, I'm a little surprised that you don't weigh 350 pounds. And I'm just sort of wondering how you would deal with that. And then my second question is, what, with these incidents that you experienced on the ships, especially with the bad weather, is there any one particular incident that sticks in your mind as being, the worst you've ever seen?
Yes, let me try to answer both of those. One, the question of how do you maintain your weight when you're on a ship for 2-3 months at a time? I live in the gym. I'm just in the gym all the time, and selective dining. I mean, you can go crazy with desserts and food. And if you're on for a week or 2 weeks, certainly you want to do that. Experience everything that the cruise line offers, including these 6-star world-renowned chefs. But for the most part, it's salads and soup at lunch, and then a dinner at night, a dessert maybe once a week if I'm on for an extended period of time. And then to get a workout every day. I train 6 days a week. Sunday I take off and just walk a little bit. But you can find the gyms available with the cardio equipment, with weight training equipment, with classes, with everything in the world, that you don't give up a thing from. I'm a member of 3 gyms here at home, and they're wonderful, but on the ship, I can look out the window of the fitness center and watch whales breaching or something like that. The other question that you had asked is, what was that one? Let's see.
Well, it was having to do with the weather. And is there any one particular incident, or maybe more than one, that sticks in your mind? And
there's 2. One is one that I'll never, ever forget. We were crossing the Drake Passage from Ushuaia to Antarctica, and it was particularly bad. It's always bad. Sometimes it's a capital bad. This one was, it's a day and a half. So, you take some Dramamine or whatever you find helpful in motion sickness, and go to bed for the day, and you're usually over it. Some people are never over it. I asked the guy when I was working in the North Sea on the oil rigs, I said, okay, you're born up here, you're from Norway. What's the secret to not getting sea? He said, the secret is there is no secret. He said, I've been at sea for 20 years, and sometimes I'm in a 30-foot sea and don't have a problem. Other times we just cast off from the dock and I get dizzy. He said, it's just amazing how that can take place. What happened in Antarctica, when we got to the other side of the Drake Passage, we were pulling into a place where we don't normally go. So I was asked to come to the bridge to provide some commentary as we're coming in. I asked the captain, I said, we're coming into this Palmer Research Center. What's going on here? He said, we're disembarking somebody. I said, you can't disembark anybody in Antarctica. He said, I know that. He said, and that's true. You can't leave anybody in Antarctica. If there is a medical emergency, they have to turn the ship around and bring that ship back to Ushuaia. You can't leave anybody in Antarctica. He said, what are you doing? He said, there is a guest who has decided he is going to disembark. He has chartered a plane to come from Chile to fly into this research station to pick him up and bring him back across there to Chile and Argentina. He said he's never going across that ocean again. I said, I can't imagine how expensive that is. He said, you won't imagine. He said, over $40,000 for that flight. But he said, I don't care what it is. He said, I'm not getting back on a ship and surely not going to cross the Drake Passage. But it was a nightmare. It was a rough time. Usually around Cape Horn, most of the ships will go through the Magellan Straits, which can be pretty ugly, but at least you navigate the Magellan Straits and you don't have Cape Horn. Cape Horn is right there at the tip, and the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans are coming together. And you've got a constant wind that blows 40 to 50 knots. It's been as much as 70, 80 knots. And it's in the wintertime, which is June, July, and August down there below the equator. We're down there in January and February, which is the best weather that you can have. Well, that's when most people who want to put on their credentials that they've been around the Horn will take a private sailboat around there. And it's the time when the cruise ships are operating around the Horn, because we'll go around that area just to say that you've been around the Horn. Captain Bligh tried for 31 days, like I mentioned earlier, and couldn't make it. He had to go around the world the other way to get to Tahiti. The wind is blowing from the west. Of course, he's making the transit from the Atlantic to the Pacific. In the days of sail, sometimes you just could not do that. So he gave up after a month and went the other way.
Yeah, I have one more question then, and I hadn't thought about this until you were talking about it. For all the time you spent on ships, did you ever much have a problem with seasickness? And because I understand some people never get over that they just simply can't tolerate. Was that ever an issue with you?
It wasn't, and I guess I've been blessed. I say my prayers every time, but I've never taken any of the medication. They have Dramamine, they have some others. Some is a non-drowsy, some is the drowsy. The best thing is to just lie down and go to sleep, wake up when it's over. When we do a crossing, the Atlantic or the Pacific it might be 10, 12 days. Atlantic crossing, usually 7 or 8. Normally they do that at the absolute best time for weather. We were once in Bermuda, though, when a hurricane hit. Well, hurricanes don't get that far. Bermuda, this Hurricane Emily in 1989 did. And we had a pretty miserable time of it there, but it's for one day. We were able to duck into a cove there and end it. But for some people who can't handle it, even with the Dramamine, they have the little pressure bracelets that you can put on that's supposed to be a pressure point. Those are supposed to be good. And then there's a little patch that many people put behind their ear. It's a time release medication, where it's not like taking a tablet to Dramamine, it's a time release. Some of those are pretty effective. But some people, for whatever, they just cannot. One lady came running down. I was watching, going out of my suite one time, and she was so happy. I said, what's going on? He's thrilled. She said, I'm not sick. I feel great. And we were just casting off from the pier. So, well, I hope you can say that in a little while, so she didn't realize we hadn't even left the pier area yet. So it's
all right.
Some people can't handle and some do.
Okay, I'm opening it up for anybody else that has a question. You can unmute your mic and ask Niki whatever it is you'd like to hear.
Niki, this is Jerry Brown. Just a bit of trivia. You mentioned that the Taj Mahal turns colors over the day, over the day. And it was turning yellow a number of years ago due to the sulfur from the foundries around the city. And I guess it was about 15 years ago, I was asked to go over to show them how to convert their furnaces from using coke as the agent to be cut to electricity. I declined for several reasons, but nevertheless, they were having that problem. I don't know if they solved it or they ever converted their foundries.
Jerry, great comment. What they've done, and not just in Agra, but in Delhi, some of the worst air in the world is there from pollution. The particular problem, as you mentioned in Agra, was the sulfur that they found. The normal pinks and the blue, light reds and that you'll have in the color of the day as the sun changes were being muted by this sulfur. So I don't know, so you didn't go, evidently somebody did, because the last couple times that I was there, it looked like it was a much improved situation over what it was maybe 15 years ago when they had asked you about it. Not that it's been solved, I don't think by any means, but I think it is much better than it was certainly at that time.
What it is.
Nikki,
Yes, ma'am.
what kind of archives do you have? You have got so many photographs. You have so much numbers off the top of your head. I just can't imagine what kind of archives you must have at home.
Well, thank you very much. I've been very blessed again to catalog these. I've got thousands of photographs that I keep from
Upstairs.
different adventures and misadventures.
This one.
The things that I should remember about taking out trash, I don't have a clue, but I can remember in 1814 when the British burned the city of Washington, this kind of things, and some of these others. And I will have all of those available for, like right now, I've got 268 of these programs. So it's trying to catalog and keep straight when we're talking about a program here or in the Med, or if I'm doing a show on Butch O'Hare in the Medal of Honor and something like that. So it's a lot of fun for me as a writer to try to catalog this and find it when I can need to put my hands on it. I'm working on a new show right now on the different types of cuisines and cultures in Asia, and how cuisine is oftentimes tied to the cultures in the 48 countries that make up what we call Asia. So it's a matter of going through now and finding what I have in Burma or Myanmar, what was Burma, and Vietnam and China and that, and then piecing it together to create, this show. So it's a challenge, but it's a lot of fun for me. And as a writer, I get asked to do an article on a transit of the Panama Canal, or what it's like to ride a camel to Aqaba, through the desert or something like this.
But you end up speaking so extemporaneously. You have no notes, and the numbers come out of your mouth. I don't know how possibly do that.
It's again, thank you very much. You've made my day, but it's a lot of fun for me. And rehearsing and getting ready for a show, I'll go over and find out, and then updating them constantly. I mean, this program now that I had done before on the Spanish flu of 1918 and what it's done to the COVID virus today.
Yeah.
I did that, back in November. Well, it's been in 1 month how much updating I've had to do of that show with what's taken place with the vaccines that are available, with the number of cases that have risen dramatically, and how Europe is again locking down. That's another reason some of the cruise ships, that tried to start up there in October, November, weren't able to do that because of the lockdown situations that's happening there. So it's updating them and constantly finding new.
Way to be done today to remove the president from the office would be for the vice president to immediately invoke the 20.
Nikki,
Yes.
this is Pat.
Yes,
What
Pat.
are the companies telling you about when they will begin travel again?
Well, I've heard from two. The primary ones that I work for now are Silver Sea and Seabourn. Now, those are considered the luxury lines. They're smaller ships. The smallest one is about 250 guests. The largest one is about 800 to 850. Seabourn is a member of the Carnival family. Carnival owns Holland America. When they own the Cunard, they own Princess, they own about 8 different cruise lines. And Seabourn is their luxury line market. They're planning on, again, these are subject to, they're planning on beginning operations again in May and probably June. May starting at the end of the month in Alaska. And all of the ships right now are scrambling for Alaska, all the cruise lines. It's going to be just a circus up there, because that's going to be a US port that they can operate out of. They leave usually from Seattle or Vancouver, and then make their way up the inside passage. So they'll be operating out of US ports. Won't have to worry about Canada, which is still in lockdown for Americans. And then June, they're going to be operating out of the Mediterranean. And that's probably where most of the other lines, Silver Sea is going to be there. The Princess Cruises, Royal Caribbean, Carnival, they'll all have ships, Celebrity, in the Mediterranean as this pandemic subsides. The vaccines are going to be more available, and the ship's going to be operating. Matter of fact, they had one trying for 7-day cruises out of Venice in Italy. It was only for Italians and only visiting Italian ports. But after the first couple of cruises, they had to shut down. They had coronavirus again detected on board. So the same thing they tried in Asia. Royal Caribbean was operating a program out of there, and they had to shut it down. Now, there is one line that's operating out of Singapore just for Singaporean nationals who have had the vaccine and will be tested before, during, and after the cruise. So there's so many things that they're having to look at as to how they're going to, matter of fact, Royal Caribbean has had 400,000 people, 100,000 people to apply for 4 different cruises as guests to come on board for free to test out the new protocols that they have for health and safety. So they've got 100,000 people who are going to do that for a week on their ships to test to see how effective those new protocols are. There, at one time, we had embarkation on one day, we leave that night. Most cruise ships were that way, going to Miami or to Rome or to Cape, whatever you are, and board in the morning, you leave that night. Now, with staggered embarkation, some people will be getting on at noon, others will be 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So you have to spend the night on ship in port. That's especially uncomfortable for people who are disembarking. You get off a ship in Miami after a cruise, you get on a flight at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll be at home in Birmingham at 5. Well, now you might not disembark until 4 or 5 in the afternoon, have to spend another night at a hotel at your port of disembarkation before you can fly the following day. So it's so many logistical problems for the air departments, for the cruise operators as to how they're going to operate, but they're hopefully by May and June that most will be back in some kind of service. And that will probably again be beginning in Alaska and in the Med.
I hope they get up and running, but it is very complicated. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
Nikki Don Long, as a practical matter, how can cruise lines operate anywhere other than, say, U.S. river cruises and U.S. ports? People are not going to be interested in going to the Med when they don't have assurance that when they get off in Barcelona or Genoa or Piraeus that those areas are free of extraordinary COVID risk.
That's an excellent point, Don. And what they're looking at is some problems that relate to just what you mentioned. If you get off the ship in these areas, many of them were requiring what they call bubble excursions. Like you get off in Genoa or in Venice or in London, and you want to go and head to a pub and have a lunch, or you want to go shopping, you're only going to be ashore in some of these places in a bubble. The excursion that the cruise line operates only in the sites that they're going to see without any interacting with the locals and not being able to leave the group. It's a bubble excursion. People say, well, I don't want any part of that. Others will say, well, what if we're doing a cruise in the Caribbean, everything is fine, we get back and ready to that. They announce that there's been a COVID experience and we're not going to be allowed off the ship in Miami until we're quarantined for 5, 7, 10 days, like what happened to a lot of people. There have been over 100,000 of the ship's crews around the world who caught that situation when they weren't allowed to get off the ship to disembark to go to their homes. They've had 26 suicides from people who were working on these ships who had just gone literally nuts trying to get off the ship. Some of them, their home countries were allowed them in. The Maldives, for example, even if you're a Maldives citizen, and many of these guys work on the ships, they had closed those borders. So the cruise line said, well, yeah, we'll get you home, but your home won't let you in. So they're stuck on the ship. With the river boats you're talking about, that has presented another thing, and that's where many people are looking. I love doing the cruises, the Mississippi River. We do the Hudson River and the St. Lawrence River, the Erie Canal, and we do the Great Lakes. Those lines are booking like crazy for the rest of this year and on into 2022. Other cruise lines are showing people are interested in cruising and want to get back to cruising. We're looking at bookings from the middle of this year all the way into 2022 that are just off the charts. But people are, as you mentioned, scared of it right now for getting into a place that's either going to quarantine you or you might run into a problem getting quarantined when you come back. And then if they're not going to operate out of Miami or Fort Lauderdale, they'd be operating, they say, out of some of the Caribbean ports. Well, some of those ports aren't allowing Americans at all. So if you're going to go out of Bridgetown, Barbados, you're going to be quarantined for 48 hours. You got to show proof that you haven't had COVID. And people are saying it's just too many hoops to jump through until they get all this straightened out. So I'm saying that it'll be, at least I'm getting a daily update from some of these cruise websites that show what's happening and how they're anxious to get back. They've lost close to $90 billion. The cruise industry has been impacted, $90 billion.